Our story is about Jing Jiuzhou, the main character, with whom many curious and secret incidents will happen, who will go through a difficult path and reveal all the secrets that lie ahead. Getting to know him, you can find out that he was previously a firefighter, and his parents left this world 15 years ago due to an accident, a fire. A few years after the tragedy, the young man himself decided to become a firefighter and fight the fact that he cruelly takes someone's life, leaving behind others like the guy himself. For quite a long time, the guy really walked towards death, sacrificing himself for the sake of other, defenseless people. But already at the present time, he retired and made peace with his worst and strongest enemy, fire. Surprisingly, after several years of fighting against the worst and extremely cruel enemy, he opened his own barbecue restaurant. But sometimes, nevertheless, everything old reminds of itself, and unknown creatures attack. And behind this is someone who should not have existed on this world, but for some reason exists. For some reason it does harm, kills, destroys. Could this be a boundless flame that has finally awakened? And when the dust settles, it seems that only the Creator himself can control the lives of others. But our main character is special, and after some time, maybe all his secrets will be revealed, secrets that neither he himself knows about, but fate has prepared a lot of interesting things ahead, and now his life will change, once and for all. The establishment that the main character opened was a fairly famous place, which had quite a few guests, which obviously couldn't help but rejoice. The main character did not work around the clock, so among the many voices, one was already reporting that he would be home soon. The main character spoke to his beloved, while throwing his jacket on top. He and his girlfriend have an important date today, so they can't be late. He had already taken the gift he had prepared for the girl, while continuing to talk on the phone. When the conversation was over and the meeting was scheduled, it was time to rush to my beloved girl. The main character was beaming like a child just from the thought of seeing Xin soon. He was in a great mood. Probably the lady who was waiting for her boyfriend was in no worse mood. The guy's attention was attracted by a message that had just appeared on the main screen, from some cat with 9 lives. Some photo was sent from an anonymous person, which aroused the guy's interest, and no matter how they warned that unknown files or photographs should not be opened, but the guy was too interested. The box with the gift, which he had previously thrown and caught, fell to the floor with a crash, and the protagonist's face turned pale from what he saw. The photograph was of his father, who had actually died quite a long time ago. The first thing that came to mind was some new type of fraud. A female voice said that his father was in the Luohan temple, and if the main character had time, he might be able to see him himself. In addition to the voicemail from the cat with 9 lives, another video came, which made me think. Or maybe this is true. These videos, the strange voice message, everything looked suspicious, but very believable. If initially, while his back was to the camera, one would think that perhaps the person was just very similar, then the next shot really surprised. In the next shot, the man's face turned towards the camera, and, damn, who, if not the man's son, could recognize the dad? Did the guy have a question in his head? Is it possible? Can a dead person who was burned alive many years ago end up in another place, but already completely alive? What if he's really alive? If it's true that the main character has an impossible opportunity to find his father? But who needs to send something like this? How does the person who sent the video know about him, about the father of the main character? Where did he or she get the guy's information? An old, childhood picture appeared in his memory, where he definitely saw a portrait of his father above the cross, above his own coffin, in which, with 100% probability, his not living body should have been located. Without picking up his gift, the guy mentally apologized to his beloved girl. He needed to find out if his father was alive. He knew where Lohan was, he knew because he had already been there. This place is not the best. When you come here at night, it looks intimidating. The guy recalled the times when he was still working as a fireman, and several years ago he was already here, fighting the fire. It was a glorious battle. it was strange to return here with the thought that his father, who died in the flames, could be here. I couldn't even believe it. Damn, where could his father come from? A man who died fucking 15 years ago, but still in some mysterious way reminded of himself now. It is not surprising that when the guy went inside, there was no one, although somewhere deep down hope did not disappear anywhere. The photo did not seem fake, and anyway, who needed to joke about the main character like that? Growling, the guy realized that a feeling of being fooled began to gnaw at him. It was all too quiet and strange. In general, it was in vain that he had come here and had not yet warned the lady of his heart that he might not come home that night. Most likely you won't show up, because the journey here and back took a lot of time. The young man wandered along the corridors, and with every step hope faded, until he heard some strange sounds that instantly attracted his attention. For some reason, there were a lot of books lying on the floor. They were in piles, they were somehow old and a little shabby. But whose are they? Why are they lying around here? What was strangest of all was that besides the books there were candles, and they were burning. Moreover, they were burning with a blue flame, not red, not yellow, not orange, but blue. And not only candles, among them all stood some kind of human-like creature. Candles, a lot of candles, and an incomprehensible drawing of something black on the floor, something like a pentagram. A creature, seemingly human, male, was at the center of it all. So maybe this is some kind of ritual? But why did that anonymous person write about this specifically to the main character? Father is not here, which means something else will happen. Looking at the man's body, one could notice that it was clearly not a healthy body, too thin and retracted. The guy literally winced at this sight, because it didn't look like a real, living person. It was thin, tall, standing among the candles, performing a ritual. Maybe they want to drag the main character into some kind of sect? That's all it looks like, obviously not something else. While the man did not notice, and while it was still possible to leave quietly, the main character decided to take advantage of this opportunity, heading back to where he came from. While he was walking, the phone rang, which was very inopportune. Until he left the room, you never know, maybe this creature will hear it. Shin called. It was already late. She's definitely so worried about the guy. If he hadn't picked up the phone, it would have only been worse. His conscience would have gnawed at him, and since he was already late, it would have been a bad idea to ignore him, no matter what his situation was. The girl said something, but the guy immediately clarified that all the details would be at the meeting, because now it would not be very convenient to talk. And while the main character wanted to quietly leave, someone moved from their place. The girl asked her lover to be careful on the way home, to which he quietly replied that he gave his word to be careful. When the Gon said this, he was almost at the exit. And as soon as the guy hung up and put the phone in his pocket, the candles went out with a strange fire. And from behind, something began to happen that made the main character look back in horror. Almost everything was in place, candles, drawings, strange ritual things, but one thing gave the guy goosebumps. That strange, thin man was not where he was not in sight at all. While the guy looked back thoughtfully and a little fearfully, that most terrible, incredibly disgusting creature was near him. Not even like that, it was now hanging over him behind his back, waiting for the main character to pay attention. And when a drop of a strange, black liquid fell on the floor, not like blood, nor water, nor anything that the guy or you and I would know, only then did he realize that he needed to look in the wrong place where he was looking now. The main character did not have time to react with any action, he only turned his shocked gaze to where the creature was. And as soon as he did this, a terrible, thin, either blue or purple hand, with huge, sharp claws, rose into the air. Only it was definitely not a manicure, these were their own nails, with their own, so to speak, terrifying design. The guy was lucky to dodge, although the creature still hit its claws right on the protagonist's stomach, scratching his t-shirt and catching his skin. And while the so-called walking corpse was running, the young man jumped back completely, trying to follow with his eyes every action of the creature. Who knows if he was connected with the devil himself. In the place where the creature had injured the main character with its dirty and sharp claws, a small wound was now visible, which caused an unpleasant tingling sensation. In the place where the eyes should have been, there were black pits, from which something dark sparkled. And the main character couldn't really understand what was happening, who he was and how the guy himself was connected to all this. Zheng stared in shock at the human-like monster in front of him. That, in turn, clearly not intending to retreat or give up, he realized, but not on his feet, but on all fours, which, given his figure and condition, looked terrible. The hands showed that even if it was a person, it was either a possessed corpse, a sectarian, or a drug addict with supernatural abilities. And it wanted only one thing, the death of the guy who, unfortunately, was left alone with her. Before the main character had time to exhale or blink, the corpse was already nearby, already enraged, flying at the guy, putting his terrible hand forward for another blow. It moved so quickly that, it seems, the guy would not have had time to say a word during this time. The monster brazenly pressed the guy to the ground with its paws, taking away the chance to resist and escape altogether. While the guy under the living corpse was trying to do something, for some reason he began to stick out his long tongue, from which drops of this substance fell. Zheng understood that if he didn't do at least something right now, not only would he not leave here alive, but his body would never be found in his life. The main character was lucky that his hands remained free, so, taking advantage of the moment, he grabbed the creature's head, squeezing its mouth. He knew that he could do something that this so-called living corpse definitely couldn't do, so holding on to that head, Zheng hit his opponent on the forehead with all his might. The guy's head was a tough nut to crack, but the corpse's was not, so after such a blow, the creature fell to its knees, holding its equally disgusting and injured head with its terrible, dirty hands. In the end, the man passed out, or maybe even died, so with a roar, he fell with his head on the floor in defeat. After such and such, the main character began to see a trickle of blood that slowly flowed down. Squatting down, the young man began to examine the corpse, and even took the hand of that creature in his hands, surprised that such a soft and warm person was a dead man. The only thing missing was a grandmother, or a mother with a child screaming throughout the street that Zheng had killed a man. The young man immediately turned around, starting to prove that he had not done anything at all, it was self-defense. But no one listened anymore, only the girl immediately called the police, complaining that they had a real murderer here, caught in his act. And in the end, no matter how hard he tried to explain the whole situation on the spot, nothing helped him at all. He was arrested on suspicion of murdering a man, and a policeman was sitting on the side, who kept asking the guy to be honest before they even arrived at the station. On the street, night time changed to earlier, quite sunny, but not for the main character, who was either yelled at, or simply asked and ordered to speak honestly. The main character with crazy bruises under his eyes said that he had something else to do than sit in this room, and he didn't invent the story, because every single one was true, but for a person who was not in his place, it was strange and not at all understandable. The policeman jumped up from his seat, asking what other charms, powers, energies, rituals and abilities. Would anyone at the police station believe such nonsense? While one policeman was reading his monologue, the second, much more important in status, entered the room, announcing that the time of this young policeman was over. The junior policeman said several times that he was not finished until the second one said that experts were taking over the case. When the main character asked what kind of experts they were, he was again told to be honest and then everything would be great. Zheng rolled his eyes tiredly, telling himself that he didn't even manage to get out, although it wasn't even his fault. While he was waiting, he was already sitting right on the table, quietly snoring, because both the night and the day had turned out to be busy, and he had not managed to simply close his eyes and take a nap for a few hours. But he didn't manage to sleep for long, because someone woke him up by staring intently and approaching. The steps of this person echoed throughout the room. It was hard not to wake up. It was a woman with purple hair, beautiful lips and something interesting just below. Dream? Or maybe not. It's too realistic. What made the guy quickly understand whether it was a dream or not was the scissors in the lady's hands, sharp ones, by the way. From such an unexpected sight, the guy's eyes opened on their own, and he brought his eyebrows to the bridge of his nose in shock. Was it really a battle again? Why this time? Not eager to remain without eyes, like the previous creature, the guy grabbed the girl's wrist and forearm with his hands, which contained the weapon. The main character pulled the lady so hard that the chair flew to the side and the chair moved back. The guy made the scissors rest on the table behind him and screamed, asking what she was doing. The lady came closer and grinned. She did not answer the guy's questions, she just continued to do her work. Making a manipulation with her hands, she tossed her scissors a little, escaping from the earlier position. Surprisingly, the girl acted very quickly and strongly, so much so that the guy himself simply could not do anything or react somehow. While the guy opened his mouth in shock, the girl had already cut with scissors what she needed in the first place. Namely, she cut off small strands of hair while the young man still did not understand what was happening and therefore allowed himself to say obscenities right under his breath. When he realized that all the lady needed was a tiny strand of his hair, he ruffled his hair with his hands in surprise, and then again looked questioningly at the leaving girl. A firm male voice spoke from somewhere, saying that the main character did not need to worry, because he only had a DNA test taken. The man is Lin Weiqing, president of the Jiangqing Research Association. Nearby is Li Tai's assistant, a strong woman both mentally and physically. The expert said that their main mission is to prove that the main character is still human. The guy stared at the people in shock, sincerely surprised that someone besides him knew that there are such walking corpses, zombies, in other words. When Li's assistant burst into the conversation, she said that the following information was strictly confidential. The deceased was a Luohan temple employee named Xuankuan. According to the conclusion of the forensic medical examination, the appearance of the corpse cannot be explained from the point of view of scientists. During the dissection, not a drop of blood was found in the body of the corpse, not even rigor mortis, cadaveric spots, internal organs, and brain. Instead, patterns were scratched into the poor guy's body. Having made his conclusions, the expert said that the body died about a week ago. Having heard that the body had been dead 6 or 7 days ago, the guy concluded that he definitely should not be a suspect. The expert replied that this is so, he will explain this to the police himself, and will release the main character, but if he suddenly feels discomfort, he will have to contact Li's assistant. The guy asked in shock if there was some kind of zombie going around now, a virus, because these two apparently knew something. To this, the elder replied that they would know all this after the results of the examination and began to leave without even saying goodbye, and the guy shouted after him the man's name, wanting to find out something. Only the woman turned around and said that the guy shouldn't bother, they'd already sorted everything out, that's why they're called experts. 2 days later, the case was closed, that is, they were simply closed, the information with that anonymous person disappeared, and the guy was finally released. And when they gave him the phone, the first thing he saw was a lot of missed calls and messages from his beloved. Of course, she was worried, no doubt. And he must tell her that everything is fine. And as soon as the guy dialed the girl's number, her father answered him, saying that everyone around already knew that the guy was detained for murder, so he would not communicate with their daughter. Never. He went to the bar and ordered some food and drinks. So much happened during these days that I wanted to lock myself at home with a bottle of whiskey and never go out. When a nice girl, a waitress, at the main character's establishment, came up to ask what happened, he rudely replied that she should mind her own business. She said that the guy was behaving strangely, and then said that a new message had arrived from the cat with 9 lives, that is, already a leaf. He thought that everything that had happened to him was not enough for them and they were again, in this way, trying to drag him into this, by the way, not at all a fun game. The envelope contained two small pieces of paper, one with strange hieroglyphs, the second with a note that said that ghosts do exist, and the guy better take care of himself. Late at night, when the guy had already decided to return home, he realized that he had drunk too much and had overdone it a little. It's good that he stayed on his feet. A drunk guy was waiting for the elevator, from which a mother and son had emerged a few minutes earlier. Their conversation was very interesting. The woman complained that the elevator was shaking, the kid said that it was all because of a huge spider. Oh, this is a child's fantasy. The woman said that the spider certainly doesn't exist anymore for the baby, and that he shouldn't beat himself up about it. A stupid conversation, but interesting. Apparently the kid watched the cartoons, that's all. The guy got a call from Lee's assistant. It was strange that she called so late, but the guy thought that something was urgent, so it would be a sin not to answer the phone. The connection in the elevator was not the best, and the last thing he heard on the phone was that some corpse had gone missing. Suddenly, something strange began to happen, but the main character did not quite understand what was due to the increased temperature in the body. At some point, he fell to the floor, and the phone fell nearby. By the way, a familiar, female voice still sounded from the receiver, asking if Zheng was still there. When the words about a corpse hit his head, and blood flowed from his temple in a small stream, he opened his eyes excitedly, asking either himself or the woman who was still on the line what kind of corpse he was talking about. The guy, who was under the influence, began to say to the woman that this was simply impossible, and a creature appeared in front of him. The elevator was broken. Apparently something strange was happening again, as if this time the situation would be the same, by the police station, or, even worse, because he was definitely not in an advantageous position. In front of the guy stood a terrifying creature, with some kind of symbols burned on his body, tall, thin, some kind of fire instead of eyes. This damn dead man looked many times more terrible than the previous one. And while the guy was looking for a connection with reality and trying to understand at least something, the monster had already raised his fist to strike first, in order to immediately destroy the guy, since this did not happen last time. Thank God, adrenaline rushed into his head from what was happening, so the guy successfully dodged the blow, which probably could have destroyed his head into a cake or broken it into millions of pieces, that is, turned his head into minced meat. The guy turned to the creature in shock. He knew that he was in for a long and difficult night, judging by how it began. Putting aside assumptions that he might be arrested again, the guy decided for himself that if this is no longer a person, but a real zombie, then people will only thank him if the main character, of course, manages to win. If the guy had chosen simple tactics to defend himself, it would have been too boring a fight, so while the creature was down, he himself had already struck. There was a strong roar, which meant that the guy had a strong hand and the blow was excellent, right on target. If I had beaten this dead man like that until the end, he might not have come to life again. The only thing that scared me was that this corpse was more stable than the last one, and the elevator could no longer stand it. He understood that he urgently needed to do something to stay alive. The corpse, which had already risen again and was already heading at incredible speed towards its opponent, did not allow one to think normally, however. The main character was not a fool, so he kicked off the floor with one foot and jumped, pointing the other straight at the monster's head. And the blow was even more than successful. To his sneakers, it hit the creature directly on the frontal part and nose. This, at a minimum, should neutralize it for a few seconds, but in general, it would be better if it immediately knocked out the enemy and knocked him out. With this maneuver, the main character also wanted to jump to the hole above. This was the only way out of this closed room. And, oh my God, he succeeded. A second later he was already sitting upstairs, which means there is a chance of survival, about 50-50. But not everything was so easy and simple. When he touched what he was standing on, a strange green glow appeared around him, as if he had activated some kind of pentagram. Everything around was covered with some kind of drawings and hieroglyphs, from which a bright, green glow emanated. This is not just strange, something bad is clearly about to happen. And at that moment, it seems, the guy began to understand what would happen. I began to feel, which caused shock and anxiety in my chest. Zheng suddenly fell to the ground, starting to scream in horror. All the hieroglyphs seemed to begin to attack his mind, and strange sounds appeared in his head that drove him crazy. It was as if his mind and body were poisoned. Instantly they became completely paralyzed, so the guy could not concentrate or get up, because his body did not obey. But the monster was not knocked out, no, on the contrary, grinning contentedly, he slowly climbed out of the elevator. Judging by his body, one could assume that the monster crawled out of the grave right now and came for him to put him in his place. That strange liquid poured out of his mouth and rose into the air above the floor, or rather the ceiling of the elevator, creating peculiar spider legs around the main character. Now it's clear who the guy was talking about. Here's a huge spider in the elevator. Having assessed the situation, the guy realized that he had already spent too much effort and energy. It was even difficult to think logically. In despair, he would have resigned himself to his fate, but suddenly he remembered the cat with 9 lives, and the sheet that she sent, or rather, what was inside. He still had the strength to put his hands in his pocket, along with the piece of paper with the hieroglyph that was in the envelope. This is the last hope for life, for the fact that he can live, exist, love, feel, and not die and become a zombie. And yes, it worked. The creature began to stare at the leaf in shock, not understanding what was happening now. Why did its victim get this? The guy began to feel that it was working, so he also continued to press, just so that it would finally come unstuck. The closer the leaf was to the creature's face, the more it moved away and growled, not understanding that it was so small, powerful and strong. And the main character, deciding to rise, almost completely put pressure on the creature with a magic leaf, in the hope that it would simply disappear into thin air, or fall down from the elevator, and then the guy would somehow get out of here. When the leaf fell directly on the creature's face, it screamed in a non-human, terrifying voice, as if thousands of voices had mixed into one. From a burning pain in its head, the creature flew back, moving away completely from the guy, finally. After all, the cat with 9 lives helped the guy survive with this piece of paper. Since there was already an abyss under the elevator, the zombie fell there, but managed to grab onto some wires, either trying to save his life, or taking the guy with him so that he too would die. The guy was lucky not to fall along with the zombies and the elevator, because he grabbed the cable that previously held the elevator. The main thing for him now is to hold on, otherwise death. The main character reached one of the doors, trying to open the doors. He needed to open them to go out onto the floor. This was his only way out of such a peculiar trap. And, fortunately, he managed to open these doors, although it was, in truth, difficult. But it definitely wouldn't have ended just like that, because the guy has already killed 2 zombies. They certainly won't just leave him. Well, no, never. When the main character finally opened the doors, he saw in front of him a man whom he did not quite expect to see here and now. Assistant Lee was already waiting for him, and as soon as she saw that the guy was alive, she was immediately happy about it. They could not relax for a long time, because another creature appeared from behind, this time a different one. By that time, the main character and Lee's assistant had already moved away from the door into the elevator, which was no longer there. The girl immediately noticed him and felt the presence of another creature. At that second, a clot of some kind of energy flew from the direction of the elevator into the guy's head, and in order to save the life of the main character, the woman slapped him in the face to move his head to the side. And he was lucky, a bolt of energy flew right over his body after Zheng fell to the ground. And the woman, in turn, simply dodged. This had happened to her more than once, so she acted quickly. The woman's weapon was in a slightly unexpected place. She pulled out a knife from a clasp on her leg, as if she were in an action movie. The assistant looked terrifying, a real, free, strong and independent woman, and with a knife in her hand, she would destroy the creature with one blow. Even the main character, looking at the woman's aura, even stared at her in shock, amazed at her power. The monster immediately realized that this girl was not an ordinary girl, and even voiced his thoughts out loud in his vile voice. This tense atmosphere was interrupted by the phone ringing, and a voice on the other side asked about the situation around the girl. She immediately said that the main character was alive, one zombie was dead, the second was in front of her. But the guy's attention was distracted by his own body. Everything suddenly swam before my eyes and there was a sharp pain somewhere in the temple area. When he felt some liquid running down his chin, he carefully touched it, and then saw a blood stain right on his hand. Little by little, he began to lose touch with reality. When he asked himself out loud what was happening to him, his voice trembled, and his eyes began to close on their own. Many years ago, the day on which the main character lost his parents, a terrible creature came to him, which called a small boy, even then, and pulled its tentacles towards him. Surprisingly, the boy reacted somehow calmly to the monster. He woke him up, so the protagonist, irritated and disturbed from sleep, asked who he was and what he actually wanted. The creature did not give answers to the questions, only said that the boy was special and obliged to obey the monster. Although initially the baby was not afraid of the creature, when it came closer and closer, proving that it was not a dream, Zheng pressed himself more and more into the bed in the hope that he could escape in this way. It was approaching the boy from all sides, scaring the hell out of the younger one. But at some point, frightened by something, the creature flew back, removing all its tentacles back to itself. Suddenly a fire appeared on the boy's bed, and some hieroglyph also appeared on the blanket, burning with a hot flame. It tried to resist the fire and destroy the little one, because such strength in such a seemingly ordinary young man is incredible. Zheng cried in fear, huddled somewhere to the side, covering his head with his hands, as if this would save him. But already at this moment, when the creature frightened him to the point of exhaustion at the most interesting moment, the main character finally woke up. The brain, apparently, could not stand it. As soon as he managed to open his eyes, a miniature, delicate girl ran up to the guy and literally grabbed onto the guy. The girl was his lover, incredibly beautiful, but concerned about the condition of the guy, who had been disconnected since yesterday evening. The main character was no longer bothered by anything. As soon as he saw a sweet girl who was bored, worried, and wanted to kiss her, so he just said that everything was fine and hugged her beloved to him. The girl pressed herself as close to her beloved as possible in order to feel the warmth leaving the guy. She was very worried, waited, hoped. But the guy was obliged to move the girl away a little, because for some reason she had scissors in her hands, which tingled his leg unpleasantly. In an instant, the girl's face changed to a more creepy one, and she asked why a sexy woman with large breasts brought the guy in her arms. The guy felt bad when the fight started, so he passed out, and the woman actually picked him up, as if she were a man, and he, on the contrary, was a fragile girl, and brought him straight to Shinshin. The guy immediately told the truth, well, not the whole truth, only that he fainted and the girl helped him get home. Memories of everything that happened yesterday came to the guy's head. He said that there was an accident in the elevator and Lee's assistant helped him so much, since he was alive, healthy and sitting in front of the girl. The girl, throwing away the scissors, pressed herself against the guy again, apologizing to him for not being there. But she had an excuse: her dad locked her at home and didn't let her see her beloved. The main character, in turn, hugged Shinshin and said that everything was fine. It was not possible to be alone with the girl for a long time, so after soaking up and enjoying each other, the guy accompanied his beloved to a taxi. Shinshin offered to meet the next day, saying that she already had an excuse in case her father did not let her go to Zheng. Having said goodbye to his beloved, the main character took his phone out of his pocket to dial his assistant Lee, who, as it turns out, carried him home in her feminine arms. When the call began, a familiar song appeared behind him, which he had heard yesterday before losing consciousness, and the guy, turning back, saw Lee's assistant, who, by some miracle, was already here. She explained her presence by saying that she didn't know if that thing would show up here again. Of course, she understood that the main character would start asking questions, so he did, initially asking who they were and where they came from. The girl, turning away, said that Jing did not need to know about this, meaning something like, "This does not concern you," but it also concerned him. He had already been attacked by those things 3 times. When Assistant Li was about to leave, Zheng put his hand on her shoulder, stopping her. And then he said that he knew a way to make a girl talk. A few minutes later, they were both sitting at the table. Several plates of delicious, signature food, as well as drinks, stood in front of the woman. The guy immediately said that she should not be embarrassed to eat. If she doesn't have enough money, then he will pay the bill himself. It's not hard for him, that's all. She served with her hands on her chest and said that she is not as easy to bribe as she can seem. The guy instantly became more serious and said that he believed that this was all connected with his father, and he should figure it out. Exhaling, Lee's assistant said that she didn't know anything about his father, and he didn't need to get involved in everything else. She didn't let the guy answer. She only said that he seemed to just want to figure out who he was even dealing with and for what reasons these creatures cling to him. The main character said that he was mentally prepared for anything while the woman opened the bottle. He almost begged to be told what kind of zombies these were, to which he received the answer that they were not zombies, but corpse eaters. They are a strange species of creatures who believe in the king of the corpse eaters. Mordikian, also known as the 1,000-armed corpse eater. The corpse eaters spread their power far and wide, trying to resurrect their king. Fraud is the most powerful sect among the corpse eaters. One of Fraud's believers named Simo recently came to Jiangcheng. Simo wanted to turn Xiankong from the Luohan temple into his servant, but the main character, Zheng Jiuzhou, prevented him. Xiankong was married, so Simo will now pursue the protagonist, so now he needs to be protected. Although before this the guy said that he was mentally prepared, now he was a little in shock, because now he needs to constantly be safe. While pouring alcohol into the glass, she said that there was one more thing, and then reminded that the main character had already fought Xiankong twice, and asked if he had noticed that black water was flowing down his body. The main character, remembering that he really saw this black water, asked what it meant. And after that she began her story, thereby answering some of the guy's questions. The woman began the story that there are many versions of this day. In the east these are the waters of the beginning. It nourishes all things and is extremely rare. There are rumors that the fishermen went out to sea and encountered strong winds. Then I wandered onto an island where peaches were blooming, and there I discovered this black water for the first time. There was not a whole lake of black water, no, just a spot of black water appeared among the clean, transparent water, that's all. In the West it is known as blagu. During the gold rush in 1850, black water first entered the Western political spotlight and was first studied by mankind. And after experiments, it acquired the name, the beginning of everything. A laboratory at Delhi Fort once conducted a study and found that the structure of black water was not ordered. They tried to inject it into a person, wanting to see what would happen. Black water can transform the gene itself, it either evolves or mutates. There were 7 such models in total. From the first to the 7th, the complexity increases, but the possibilities decrease. The appearance of the present person is associated with type 7, while monsters are 5. The main character opened his mouth because he realized that something truly terrifying could have happened to him yesterday. Lee's assistant confirmed his thoughts and said that if he had become infected that night, he would have been dead by now. This means that he was very lucky that there was that leaf and a woman nearby. With this thought, seemingly quite calmly, the guy managed to sleep through the night, and on this day, he, as agreed with his girlfriend, went to an interesting place to have a good time, enjoying each other's company. Finally, he breathed back his old life, remembered those days when he just fell in love with Xin and they constantly spent time together and no one forbade them to see each other. This day should not portend any misfortune, he at least hoped for it. But, for some reason, after that conversation, an anxiety settled in his chest that did not want to leave him even for a moment. It seems that he worked himself up so much that again, as in his nightmares, he saw that creature. Looking more closely, the guy realized that there was nothing there. It just seemed like it, and the anxiety in my chest intensified. Due to the fact that the main character blew himself up while peering out the rear-view window, the girl woke up, asking what happened. He shared with the girl that he seemed to see someone in the tunnel, but she only said that he just thought it was too dark to see anything. Then he said that he was simply mistaken, and thought to himself that he should enjoy being with the girl and stress himself out less. But he still felt the presence of someone else. And this someone else was clearly not an ordinary person. After some time, they had already arrived in Yuqing, and Xin was pointing at a beautiful tree, enjoying the beauty of this place. She pulled the main character towards her by the hand, saying that they could make a wish here. And although it's a little childish, it's very cute and romantic. After some time, while they were walking, something strange flashed before the guy's eyes. Some plump guy, grinning strangely, said that the soul of the main character was somehow empty, and his eyes were dark. He also added that a dark cloud rose above Zheng. And the guy, frowning, finished speaking instead of the chubby guy, which means that a catastrophe will soon await him. Not wanting to listen to this man's nonsense anymore, he took the girl by the hand and led her away from here, saying that he was telling this to everyone. But that guy added that the main character had encountered a real demon and now his luck was at its lowest. Then he asked if Zheng still believed that this guy was a charlatan. He also said that a lonely star would soon enter his life and sooner or later, fortunately for the guy, they would definitely help him. And at the end he also said something strange, the soul flew away and died. The main character no longer understood this phrase. Hearing all this, everything that was really happening to him, the main character shuddered and turned around sharply. After this, the man approached and slipped a glass of water under the protagonist's nose. And after that, oddly enough, he began to talk some nonsense. He said that he was selling the cup of luck for only 38. I also added that at such a cheap price, they will all just walk around and be happy, they will always carry the most sincere smiles with them. Without allowing the main character to say a word in response, he introduced himself. He said that his name was Taoist, a disciple of Yu Qingguan in the 27th generation. Adding luck to people is his job. After that, he suggested that Zheng buy the bowl, then luck would be on his side. The girl, who knew that the guy had been plagued by failures lately, actually offered to buy it. Exhaling, he just told her to forget and that they should go, they had money to spend on. The girl, having no desire to resist or argue, said that they could really go, and the seller folded his arms over his chest and exhaled with displeasure. Among all this, the most interesting thing was that the seller did see a black cloud hanging over the guy. In fact, he was not an ordinary person, but also a good one at the same time. He carefully directed his water behind Luck's ear, in order to help at least a little in this way. Whispering, he conveyed the thought directly to the main character's head, so that he really would be more careful. He said that not all people close to him would be able to bear the burden that fell on the shoulders of the main character. Their romantic date ended, and when it was already starting to get a little dark, they headed home, again on the bus. Xin, tired from the day, laid her head on the guy's shoulder, falling asleep, and he kept thinking about what happened. If you carefully think about what that person said, then Zheng needs to stay away from Xin specifically so as not to harm her. But what could threaten her so much? He would really like to believe that nothing threatened her, that this would all end and that they, together with their beloved, would return to normal life. Thoughts about the girl almost left him when he realized that they were moving somehow too quickly. The pictures outside the window changed so quickly that it was impossible to see anything. He assumed that he was having an illusion again, because the bus was accelerating and accelerating every second, to a breakneck speed, but would a driver with a sober mind do such a thing? He realized that there was already some kind of problem, and, apparently, something connected with the driver. The sleeping girl fell on her lover's lap, for some reason not waking up. He noticed that the girl in the seat in front had also passed out. She fell head first on the bus window. A message came to the phone from the cat with 9 lives, saying that there was a problem with the bus and the guy needed to escape as quickly as possible. The anxiety inside grew more and more, along with the speed at which the bus was traveling. He didn't understand what was happening and what he should do now. How to save yourself, how to save people. Rising to his feet, he carefully laid Shinshin, who was sleeping soundly, on a chair, and he himself decided to check what was wrong with the driver. Because the bus was in frantic motion, he had no way to escape. The only thing that can save you is a bus stop. Holding tightly to the seats, he began to shout for the driver to stop, and he himself, quietly, headed in his direction. When he managed to get there, he screamed very loudly so that the driver would finally stop the damn bus. But he didn't react in any way, so the guy turned to the driver again, in an attempt to somehow attract attention to himself. What a surprise the main character was when he saw many scratches on the guy's face, eyes that looked in different directions, and in general this terrible expression on his face. Zheng realized that the driver was being controlled and it was almost impossible to reach his mind. And the bus flew at higher and higher speeds, without braking for a second, missing the turn. Then the main character was thrown away and his back hit the wall of the bus. After that, he fell face down on the ground, realizing that if he could not stand on his feet, then his girlfriend in the back seat was no better. And it was true. He saw his beloved girl, the lady of his heart, who was lying on the floor and never regained consciousness. When she fell, she hit her head hard, causing blood to appear on her forehead. The guy, rising through pain and strength, went straight to his beloved, worrying about her more than about himself. And the driver continued to shout that he would die and everyone would die, he would not let anyone survive. 2 buses left the road due to the madness of the driver, and they began to fall off the cliff. The guy did not have time to reach the girl, who was simply thrown off the bus. At that time, a conversation began between Lee's assistant and the expert. Lee's assistant, for some reason, broke the expert's plate, to which he raised his head in surprise and asked what she was doing. In response, I heard that even though they had signed a contract, this did not mean that she would constantly sit with her arms folded. She said that she felt that the main character's scent had changed, so she checked the DNA test results herself in the laboratory and found out that the expert had falsified the results. The man said that he really just wanted to save the young man. Assistant Lee said she didn't care and turned around and started walking in the other direction. And the man flew up, asking if she was going to kill the guy. In response, he heard that the meaning of her life was the execution of corpse eaters. The bus stopped in the forest. With the enormous speed with which it fell, it even broke the trees that had been growing here and had stood quietly for several years. The main character managed to survive, but his entire body was pierced by terrible pain. Even despite this, he understood and went to his beloved, wanting to check if she was still alive. After all, she, without regaining consciousness, was lying on the floor, if this, of course, could still be called a floor. Having checked her, he realized that, fortunately, she was not seriously injured, there was only a wound on her forehead, that's all. The silence inside the bus was interrupted by the hoarse voice of a guy who begged the main character for help. It was the driver, only this time no one was driving him. Shards of glass pierced his back and arm, and Zheng, in order to calm him down, said that he would now call an ambulance. But the unexpected happened, the guy was grabbed by the corpse eater. Damn it, it was here too. It created all this, to put it mildly, chaos. After this, the guy, that is, the main character, saw a hand hanging from above, with scarlet liquid flowing down from it. Either blood or something else. This viscous liquid flowed down his hand and right onto the face of the guy, who opened his eyes in shock, not understanding what was happening. After the guy, these tentacles reached out to Shinshin, attaching themselves to her head. The main character jumped behind Shinshin, trying to grab her leg, but didn't have time. He didn't have time, firstly, because the girl was quickly pulled by the tentacles, and secondly, because these tentacles grabbed his back. Not sparing the main character, the tentacles pulled his body with such force that they also broke the window of the bus in order to pull it out from the inside. He tried to somehow resist, but the tentacles held too tightly, and his body ached in pain. Later he felt that he had stopped flying, as if he had been caught in a web of those tentacles. Opening his eyes slightly, he realized that he seemed to be in a web. But someone else attracted his attention, so he turned his gaze in the direction from which the voice came. It was the owner of these tentacles, the so-called spider, who, by the way, arranged all this, took possession of the driver's mind, brought their bus into this forest and picked up all the people into his web. The main character recognized him as the one Lee's assistant, Simo, told him about. And this Simo wrapped everyone who was on this bus in cocoons and grinned evilly. The main character shouted loudly that he recognized this creature, and he laughed that it seemed that nice girl, meaning Lee's assistant, told Zheng something about him. Clenching the fist in which he had those tentacles, he pulled one of the people towards himself. When the man found himself face to face with this corpse eater, the main character twitched and screamed so that Simo would not touch other people who were not guilty of anything. Simo brought his hand to the man's waist and pressed with 2 fingers. The same black water flowed from the man's mouth, which was already a bad harbinger. With madness in his eyes as red as blood, Simo said that it was time for this man to become a slave to the corpse eater and gain the power of faith. He drove this black water into the body of the poor young man and squeezed his hand tighter on his neck, to the point that the man simply turned blue. His face was filled with this black water, and his eyes rolled up. The guy screamed that it was better for this Simo to attack him than other innocent people. In response to this, the man said that Zheng need not worry, because everyone's turn will come. But the last in line was probably Zheng Jiuzhou, because the monster wanted to mock the guy so that he could see how everyone who was alive would lose their soul. Simo angrily, but at the same time satisfied, screamed with a grin that no one would be saved that night, and then jumped towards the girl, hanging over her. And then he exposed his fangs, which made the excitement and madness in his eyes shine even more. The guy simply couldn't let this damn corpse eater mock his beloved somehow, but he understood that he was not in an advantageous position, since he could only move his mouth. When Simo, with his mouth slightly open and his fangs exposed, approached Shinshin's neck, the protagonist decided to use his mouth and screamed, asking a rhetorical question about whether Mordikian was his leader. The main character started talking nonsense about how a guy had a dream about his leader last night and now he doesn't understand how anyone can believe in something so disgusting. And he managed to divert the attention of the corpse eater from Shinshin. He turned around and said that Zheng should not piss him off, because such an important being as his god would not come to such a pathetic guy as the main character. He did not shut up, thereby continuing to talk and tease Simo. The next thing he said was that he had no reason to lie, that the leader of the corpse eater had a mustache like a squid, his face was also covered in bumps. At first glance, he had eaten too much of all kinds of rubbish, his brain was underdeveloped. So he began to come up with all sorts of garbage. Such arrogant words and behavior of the guy seriously angered Simo. He ordered the guy to shut up. To finish off, that is, to anger the man even more, he said that he then boiled his mustache. It didn't look very good, but it tasted just right. Then he noticed that the already extremely angry man had attached his tentacles to his chest, pulling him towards him. The man began to say that no one had ever had the right to say such things about his leader, but if this guy dared, he would regret that he was born. He grabbed the guy's body with tentacles and began to pull him towards himself with great speed in order to destroy him and close his mouth. The guy understood perfectly well that it was very dangerous, incredibly dangerous for his life. But he managed to free one hand, which was clutching a piece of something sharp, a fragment, probably. And when the guy was already above the creature, he sharply spread his arms and legs to the side, freeing himself from the tentacles, and pointed the fragment directly at the sectarian's face. But, unfortunately, he failed to do what he had planned. And the man, mocking the guy, bared his teeth. He stopped a centimeter from the enemy, without attacking. He mockingly asked if the main character really believed that he could hurt. Then he said that the guy shouldn't remember who his enemy is. And one of the tentacles pierced his hand, which contained his so-called weapon. A driver who, even if he survives, will feel guilty for the rest of his life. His poor Shinshin, who suffered, although she should not have been involved in all this at all. The guy blamed himself for everything. After all, if he hadn't been on the bus, everything would have been fine. The tentacles no longer held the young man at all, so he flew to the ground after that unsuccessful attack. Having landed, his body hit the hard ground painfully, and blood gushed from his hand. He understood that he simply could no longer move, all his bones seemed to have been broken several times. In a hoarse voice, tired from everything, the guy asked why Simo was doing all this. And in response he received that the plan according to which their leader should return required a lot of consumables. He said that it was an honor for the guy to be one of those who could make their leader come back. The guy didn't understand how a man wasn't disgusted by himself describing the murders of people. Losing contact with the world, he saw himself, together with his girlfriend, deep in some ocean, from which there seemed to be no way out. Most of all I was rooting for my beloved, because, in fact, if the main character does nothing, then she will die because of her irresponsible boyfriend. Even though his whole body ached, he still pulled his hand towards her, pulling in the hope of a miracle. Instead of a girl, something red got into her hand. When he touched it, he felt angry. But before that, he experienced excitement, anxiety, fear, but not anger, no. And now he was angry, out of hopelessness, because Simo had taken possession of him, Shinshin, and many other innocent people. The anxiety inside gave way to anger, which burned out all the boundaries from the inside. Anger broke boundaries, burst out into freedom. And the anger was accompanied by a wild, furious fire, even the eyes shone with rage. Then he felt omnipotent, such a force was raging inside that it seemed that it could resist anyone, and this corpse-eater was nothing at all. Simo never expected this, he didn't think that he would see how such a seemingly ordinary, even pitiful person like Zhengjiuzhou had such powers. He was able to protect himself from the attack of the corpse-eater, he was able to fight back. In shock, the man stared at the guy, not expecting that he would also become like him, would also have powers. But Simo immediately began to deny this, because then the main character would not have resisted, but would have been on their side. He didn't understand what was in this boy's body then, since he was not a corpse-eater. The main character said that he is Zhengjiuzhou, an ordinary retired fireman, the owner of a barbecue restaurant, and he himself does not know what is happening to his body, but he has a wild desire to pin his opponent to the ground and give him a good beating, knocking out all the crap. Smirking, he cried out that he truly wished death to his enemy and decided to attack from a running start. For a second, horror appeared in Simo's eyes, no, even fear flashed at what the main character could be like, what powers he might actually have. But while he was running, he felt that he had no strength, that fatigue knocked him down as soon as he got to his feet, and this terrible aura of his disappeared as quickly as it had appeared. He fell right in front of his opponent, he felt disappointed. The power within him appeared for a few seconds, but immediately disappeared, so he was defenseless again. Although the anger and rage did not disappear, horror again became a veil before his eyes. Fear for yourself, fear for your girlfriend, fear for everyone else. Mocking, Simo said that the guy was just wasting his time, he was the same weakling as he was originally and he had thought too much of himself. He pinned the boy's head to the ground with his foot, preparing for the blow that would finally destroy this fool who was playing at being a hero. At the moment when Simo was ready to punish and kill the pathetic guy, something strange happened. To everyone's surprise, a strange rabbit appeared. Small holes appeared on his ears, which was strange and incomprehensible to both Simo and Zheng. And suddenly, such a cute rabbit began to attack. He began to shoot directly at the man, thereby protecting the main character. Simo quickly pulled away from the guy and began to turn away from the rabbit's bullets. He was dumbfounded and asked who this was and what was going on. A small drone flew up to the guy and a surprised voice was heard from them, who did not expect that Zheng would hold out for so long. The guy realized that this was the cat with 9 lives and immediately asked if those mini cartridges were, and up close he realized that they were needles, poisonous. They just attacked him, to which the answer was heard to stop ask stupid questions. Simo continued to fight, so he created some more of his tentacles to fight. Angry, he said that he would destroy everyone who stood in his way, especially the guy who was already very annoying to him. There were always some obstacles and problems in order to finally destroy him. Then the drone asked whether the guy still wanted to live. The response was immediate and expected. Watching this whole picture from above, she said that in this case, he needs to do something small that will save his life. A very young girl, so fragile and sweet, with a cute print on her t-shirt, was holding a serious weapon in her hands and, smiling, said that he just needed to duck down. The man, whose wreaths were already standing out from anger, rushed towards the guy to finally destroy him. Seeing this, she immediately, without doubting herself for a second, fired. It was a tense moment, everything around the guy was happening somehow too quickly. The guy expected everything, but damn, just duck. How will this save his life? He didn't understand at all why this was necessary, but there was still nothing else left, so he listened. In order not to see or hear all this, he simply covered his head with his hands, in the hope that it would help. The man stopped when he realized that something was flying at him, something that was clearly capable of shooting him in the head. It didn't shoot a hole, it just blew his head off. And then the headless body fell back. The battle was finally over. When the guy realized that he was alive and Simo was no longer a threat to him, he said that the cat with 9 lives was simply a miracle. No, well, she really saved his life. She truly is a holy person. Grinning, she said that she was simply not indifferent and quickly said goodbye and hung up. Being conscious, he understood that he had an obligation to help everyone who had suffered because of him, so he called an ambulance and pulled everyone out of that thing, then helped them move to one place. When he realized that the last person had reached him, he felt that he himself could no longer stand it. I felt terrible dizziness and my nose was bleeding. When he had helped everyone, he sat down next to his beloved girl, leaning his back against a tree to breathe out at least a little. But suddenly a familiar voice was heard, which quickly brought the guy to his senses again. Someone asked if he killed Simo. This someone was Lee's assistant, who, by some miracle, always knew where the main character was. Rejoicing, he again, with difficulty and through pain, rose to his feet, using for this purpose some kind of stick that was the first to come to hand. He asked Assistant Lee to do him a favor, and she, watching the guy, thought that only the corpse eaters could still move with so many fractures. It was amazing how he tried to still do something, although in a minute she would have to kill him. She knew that someone like him could not be left alive. There are no good eaters, there never were, and there never will be. She quietly crept up behind him so that the guy's death would be quick and not too painful. While he was still doing something there, freeing a toy from this web and telling something, his death was already hanging over him. He said something about how the man who was outside asked to take a gift for his daughter. But the guy wasn't sure that he would live, so he relied on Lee's assistant. It will be sad that the child will be alone on his birthday and without a gift. The hand that was holding the knife trembled. How can there still be something human in him? The guy threw the toy up for Lee's assistant to take it. She immediately picked up the soft, small rabbit. And the guy realized that he no longer had the strength to hold on, literally no strength at all. So he fell onto the bus window with a loud crash, exhaling. This boy has been through a lot, too much. And how could she kill? No, definitely not. She simply would not have had the strength to kill a man who remained a man with a heart to the end. After some time, an ambulance arrived and took away everyone who was injured, in the hope that the doctors could save them. The news said that at 6 o'clock the previous night, Bus 52 had been involved in an accident, resulting in 2 deaths and 5 injuries. The police continue to investigate the causes of the accident, but are unlikely to find out the true cause. At that time, the head doctor was leading the students into one of the rooms where, according to him, there was a patient who had been in an accident. Many fractures throughout the body and damage to the spine. In addition, the displacement of the bone pierced the right atrium, and the internal bleeding was very serious. On it they will learn to look after a dying person. The doctor said that the guy's condition was completely hopeless, and so that the students would not be frightened, they would often have to see this. The patient in question was our main character, who, damn it, after so many injuries, was now doing push-ups on one arm, as if nothing had happened to him. Then the doctor thought that he probably had the wrong door. To this the guy said that the doctor was not mistaken, his name is Jojo. In the morning he felt much better. The nurse saw that he could already get up, so she offered to undergo rehabilitation training. The doctor held his head in shock and said that this was simply impossible, because just yesterday there was no chance of salvation. The guy, of course, didn't understand anything himself, and the doctor, who, by the way, was looked at strangely by the students, said that Zheng could rest, he would talk to the doctor about it later. One of the students, who, it seemed, was not a student, but a nurse, quietly reminded the doctor that yesterday, in fact, he was the doctor who admitted this guy. The elder ordered the nurse to speak more quietly, because he would not have acted differently. What else could he say so as not to embarrass himself in front of everyone? And the only one who heard everything was the main character himself. It was strange, because an ordinary person should not have heard what and who was saying so far away and even in a whisper. Suddenly his hearing became more acute, causing all the words and phrases that people said to hit his head. He decided not to think that this was happening to him, to just enjoy the fact that he was still alive. Now he needed to check his Shinshin. In the morning, he found out that she was in room 606 and began to head in that direction until he heard that someone was already near the room. He overheard Shinshin's father talking to some guy who hired her the best specialist, for which the old man thanked him. Jiafeng, that was the guy's name. He himself introduced himself to Shinshin's father when he said that he had to go and left the care of his daughter to this guy. Shinshin once said that she was being pursued by some rich man who was head over heels in love with her. Maybe she will really be better off with him? She is really in danger with the main character. That seller warned him that something terrible could happen. It's a pity that he didn't buy that cup of good luck, maybe then this wouldn't have happened. Although it is stupid to believe in such things, fate decides everything instead of them. The young aristocrat said that in the future they would definitely become related, and the guards standing nearby seemed to notice the main character who was eavesdropping on the conversation. And he really noticed, and immediately told his master about it. Instantly his face changed and began to walk straight towards Zheng, whom he hated with all his heart and soul. And when he came closer, he irritably slammed his fist right next to the main character's head, causing him to scream in shock. He yelled at Zheng because when he went to the hospital, he didn't even have a chance to survive, but now this guy is standing in front of him as if nothing had happened. He said it didn't matter and asked how Shinshin was. Then this pompous peacock hit the guy on the forehead with his finger, saying that he and Shinshin were from different worlds, and that the guy should not dare to approach her anymore. To this, the main character pushed the other's hand away with his own and said that he just wanted to find out if everything was fine with her, and if he didn't answer, the main character would check himself. The blonde took this as a challenge, asking what right a simpleton like Jing Jiuzhou had to challenge him. Then, sparing no effort and the guy, he kicked him hard, so much so that Jing could not even stand on his feet. He hit his head on the railing, and there were derailments behind him. Then the blonde approached again and grabbed him by the hospital shirt, growling that Li Xian belonged only to him, and if Jing did not hear, the conversation would be different. He said that it was not a request, but a damn order, otherwise the main character would lose his nose, which would stick where it shouldn't. Why should the main character, who survived such horror, be afraid of a rooster like this blonde? That's right, there is nothing to be afraid of him, so, grinning, he said that he would not even think about listening to him, agreeing with him, or even worse, obeying him. Then he let go of the guy's shirt and lifted his leg, pushing him towards the stairs. Then the main character, who was already covered in wounds, experienced more action during these days than he had ever experienced in his entire life, and flew down the ramp. He didn't expect such a cruel setup. Then, to humiliate the guy even more, the blonde said that his shoe was dirty and ordered the bodyguard to wipe it. Smirking at the crash with which the main character fell, he told the bodyguard to say that this one just tripped and fell down the stairs. His face acquired new bruises, and his eyes became very red. He sincerely did not understand why he couldn't love, why he couldn't live, damn it, enjoy life. I just suffered all the time. The blonde compared the main character to a cockroach on his way, which he could crush at any moment. To the surprise of the peacock, the main character stood up, fell down the stairs and, damn it, got up. He got to his feet. It's simply impossible, but he did it. Then both stared at the guy in shock, not understanding how he was able to get up. And he was able to, being not at all an ordinary person, like a blonde, having incredible powers that, as then, in battle, burned from the inside. His eyes sparkled with madness when he said in an incredibly dark voice that since he was already a cockroach, then maybe it was the peacock who should feel like he was in Zheng's skin. And at that moment he climbed the entire staircase, rising in the air above the frightened owner and dog. By the way, the owner was already hiding behind the puppy, trying to save his miserable life. But even if the bodyguard wanted to, he wouldn't have time, because a fist had already landed on the blonde's cheek. And this blow was not simple, it was so strong that the blonde flew several meters away. And he, not lagging behind for a second, was again close, right in front of the pitiful guy, and then stuck his hand in his hair, squeezing tightly. And then he said something that gave the rooster goosebumps. He said that maybe he should crush the guy like a cockroach, get rid of this evil spirits on his way, but why not? If you have watched up to this point, then I am very grateful to you, because this is where the video ends. If it's not difficult for you, then like this video and subscribe to my channel. And if you want to continue this story, then write in the comments. Thank you all, I love you all.